I never imagined this would be the day I'd be standing here, looking at the woman who shot my daughter in the playground. The sound of that gunshot still echoes in my ears. The look in Karen's eyes, the smug satisfaction she had when she pulled the trigger, will haunt me forever. My heart was racing as I held Emily in my arms, her tiny body limp, blood pooling around us. But what Karen didn't know, what no one in this neighborhood knew, was that I wasn't just a mother. I wasn't just a woman desperate to protect her child. I am an FBI agent, and not just any agent. I'm the best in the field. I've brought down dangerous criminals, but nothing prepared me for the war that was about to unfold right in front of me. And I wasn't going to let Karen get away with this. The playground was supposed to be a safe place. It was supposed to be the one place I could let my guard down, watch my daughter laugh with her friends, and enjoy the simple joy of her childhood. Emily was my world, and I would do anything to protect her. But that morning, everything changed. As I watched her swing higher and higher, her laughter filling the air, I noticed Karen standing off to the side, watching us with a cold, calculating stare. Karen was the unofficial leader of the Homeowners Association, a woman who had built a reputation for being rigid and controlling, never satisfied with anything or anyone around her. Over the years, I had learned to ignore her, but today, something felt different. The look in her eyes sent a shiver down my spine. Before I could react, there was a sudden, deafening crack, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. My heart stopped. Time seemed to freeze as I turned to see Emily fall, her body crumpling like a rag doll. In an instant, the peaceful playground was filled with screams, chaos, and panic. I rushed to her side, blood soaking my hands as I tried to stem the bleeding, but what Karen didn't know, what no one in this neighborhood knew, was that I wasn't just a mother. I wasn't some helpless woman caught in a terrifying situation. I was an FBI agent. I had trained for moments like this. I had brought down dangerous criminals, infiltrated criminal organizations, and faced life-threatening situations. And now I was about to use everything I knew to protect my daughter and make sure Karen would never get away with this. This wasn't just about a mother seeking justice for her child. This was personal, and I was ready to fight back. It was just another ordinary day in the suburban neighborhood where we had settled, a place where the lawns were manicured, the houses were picture-perfect, and everyone seemed to know each other's business. I had always considered it a peaceful community, a safe haven for me and my daughter, Emily. We had lived here for almost 3 years, moving from the chaos of city life to escape the noise and danger that had once surrounded us. I was determined to give Emily the childhood I never had, one filled with laughter, play, and innocence. This was supposed to be a normal, carefree morning. I had woken up early like I always did to make breakfast for Emily before we went out. She loved pancakes, so I made her favorite, extra syrup with a side of fresh fruit. She had already bounced out of bed, her energy infectious, her excitement for the day apparent in the way she skipped around the kitchen. "Mom, can we go to the playground today?" she had asked, her wide eyes sparkling with the innocence that only children possess. I smiled at her. "Of course, sweetheart. After breakfast, we'll head over there. But first, we need to finish your pancakes." We had been to that playground 100 times. It wasn't a huge park, but it had everything a child could need. Swings, a slide, monkey bars, and a sandbox that Emily loved to dig through. Every weekend, the local kids would meet there, and the parents would gather in little cliques, chatting away as the children played. It was a normal scene. Families coming together in harmony, bonding over their children's laughter and shared experiences. Or so it seemed. As I helped Emily into her jacket, I made sure to grab my purse, my phone, and the essentials. It wasn't much, just a small bag, a few dollars for a coffee, and a spare set of keys. We left our house and walked down the quiet street, the sun still climbing in the sky, casting long shadows on the sidewalks. It was one of those crisp mornings where the air was cool, but not unbearable, and the promise of spring lingered in the breeze. I had no idea how quickly everything would spiral out of control. The playground wasn't far, just a few blocks away. We arrived in no time, and Emily practically ran to the swings as soon as we entered the park. I waved at a few familiar faces, mothers and fathers I had known for a while. It was the kind of place where everyone greeted each other by name, even if it was just a simple hi or good morning. The small talk was harmless, and there was comfort in knowing we were all in this together. A community of people trying to raise their children in a safe environment. But there was one person I could never quite get along with. One person who always made me feel uneasy, even though I could never fully explain why. Karen. If there was anyone who embodied the idea of the perfect neighbor, it was Karen. Her house was the most pristine on the block. Her lawn was flawless, the hedges trimmed just right. She was the head of the homeowners association, the HOA as everyone called it, and she took her role far too seriously. She was obsessed with the rules. The HOA rules. The neighborhood rules. Rules about everything from the color of your house to the number of flowers you were allowed to plant in your garden. And if you dared to break one, you'd hear from her. The complaints would start immediately. But Karen wasn't just the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. She was also a master manipulator. She always seemed to have something to say about every single family. Her eyes were always scanning, always judging, and nothing ever seemed to meet her standards. I'd heard from other neighbors about how she'd once criticized someone for not picking up their dog's waste on time, or how she'd told a mother she couldn't have a trampoline in her backyard because it was an eyesore. And today, I could feel her eyes on me, even though she wasn't saying anything. She was standing near the swings, arms crossed tightly over her chest, a frown etched into her face. She was watching Emily, but not in a warm, protective way like a mother would. No, Karen's gaze was cold, calculating. Her eyes bore into me, as if she were waiting for me to make a mistake, for me to do something she could criticize. I tried to ignore her. I didn't need her judgment, not today. I wanted to focus on Emily. She was laughing, kicking her legs as she swung higher and higher, her pigtails bouncing with every movement. Her joy was contagious, and I couldn't help but smile at the pure happiness she radiated. But something was off. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a sense of unease creeping over me. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe it was because of the way Karen kept staring at me from the corner of my eye. Then the moment came, a sharp, unmistakable crack. The sound of a gunshot shattered the calm. Time seemed to stop. I turned, my heart sinking into my stomach. The scream caught in my throat as I watched Emily fall from the swing. She didn't scream, didn't cry out in pain. She just dropped, her body crumpling in slow motion, as if time itself had decided to play a cruel trick. It took me a split second to react. I ran, faster than I had ever run in my life, my mind screaming at me to get to her. My legs burned, but I didn't care. All I could think about was Emily, my little girl, lying motionless on the ground. When I reached her, I knelt down, my hands trembling as I checked for a pulse. I could feel her heart, faint but there. But then I saw the blood. So much blood. She had been shot. The world around me went silent, muffled by the pounding of my heart in my ears. I screamed for help, my voice a raw, primal sound of terror. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew that help wouldn't come in time. And then, through the haze of shock, I looked up and saw her. Karen, standing there, watching, smiling. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen had shot my daughter. I didn't know why. I didn't know how. But I would find out. And I would make her pay. The world around me seemed to collapse into a vacuum, as though every sound had been swallowed by the deafening silence that followed the gunshot. I could barely process what had just happened. One moment, I was watching Emily play. The next, she was lying motionless on the ground, blood slowly spreading across the playground soft dirt. Emily, sweetheart, please wake up. I cried, my voice breaking as I gently cradled her in my arms. The warmth of her body was quickly fading, and I could feel my own pulse racing, out of control. My hands trembled as I pressed them to her chest, feeling for any sign of life. But all I could feel was the blood. Blood everywhere. I wanted to scream, to panic, but I had been trained for moments like this, moments that would test every ounce of my resolve. I couldn't let fear take hold. I had to focus. I had to stay calm. "Mommy, it hurts." Her voice, weak and fragile, cut through the panic in my chest. "Hang in there, baby. Please just hang on," I whispered through clenched teeth, trying desperately to stop the bleeding with my sleeve, but it was no use. The blood wouldn't stop. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that it drowned out everything else. I could barely breathe as I scooped Emily up and started running. The playground was a blur, the swings, the sandbox, the slides, everything spinning in and out of focus. All that mattered was Emily, getting her to safety, getting her help. I ran toward the nearest exit, shouting for help, but my voice felt as though it were trapped somewhere deep in my throat, too panicked to be heard clearly. No one seemed to be reacting quickly enough. Parents were frozen in shock, their faces pale with disbelief. Some had pulled out their phones, probably calling 911, but I couldn't wait for the sirens to arrive. Not when every second counted. The pain in my chest was suffocating, but I pushed it aside. I had to keep moving. By the time I reached the park entrance, I could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles approaching in the distance. But the sight of Karen, standing at the edge of the playground, just watching, made my blood run cold. I froze for a moment. There she was, calm as could be, a faint smirk playing on her lips, as though nothing out of the ordinary was happening. She wasn't rushing to help. She wasn't even looking at me with any semblance of concern. No, Karen was standing there as if it were a normal day, a spectator in a world that was crumbling before my eyes. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a random act. Karen had shot my daughter. She had done this deliberately. The thought was like a cold fist squeezing my heart. I struggled to stay composed as I handed Emily to the paramedics, who were now taking over. They immediately went to work, stabilizing her, placing her on a stretcher. But my mind was still back on Karen. My blood boiled as I turned to face her, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Why?" I demanded. My breath came in ragged gasps. "Why did you do this? Why did you shoot my daughter?" Karen didn't flinch. She didn't even show the slightest sign of remorse. In fact, she looked almost pleased. "You don't understand, do you?" she said, her voice cool and unbothered. "This was never about your daughter. It was about you." I stared at her, struggling to process what she was saying. "What do you mean it was about me?" I could hardly breathe. Karen's eyes glinted with a dark satisfaction, and she took a step closer to me. "I've been watching you for a long time. You think you can just move in here, act like you're better than everyone else, make your own rules?" She paused, taking a slow breath. "I don't take kindly to people like you. You're too unpredictable, and I can't allow that. I run this neighborhood. I always have." My stomach churned. It was surreal. Karen wasn't just some crazy woman with a vendetta against me. No, this was something bigger. She wasn't acting on a personal grudge. She was part of something more twisted, a part of a web I hadn't even begun to understand. I took a step toward her, my fists clenched. "This isn't about the neighborhood," I said, my voice low and seething. "You just shot my daughter, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Her smirk never faltered. "You won't stop me," she said, as if she were the one in control. "You're just a mother. You don't know who you're messing with." I wanted to scream, but I didn't have the energy. I could feel the heat of anger rising within me, but there was something else brewing beneath the surface. Something much colder. The police arrived moments later, and they quickly took control of the scene. But I was already thinking ahead. I knew the situation was more than just a shooting at a playground. There was a deeper agenda here, something far darker than a simple act of violence. I stood back, forcing myself to breathe. Emily was being rushed to the hospital, and all I could do was pray that she would survive. I turned my attention back to Karen, who was now being handcuffed by the officers. But the way she looked at me, like she knew something I didn't, made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't explain. There was something familiar about the way she acted, something far too cold and calculated for a mere neighborhood busybody. I'd heard whispers over the years, rumors about shady dealings, hidden motives, and a network that extended far beyond the confines of this quiet suburban neighborhood. And in that moment, I realized that I was standing at the edge of something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was standing on the edge of an entire criminal network, and Karen was just the tip of the iceberg. But what Karen didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't just any mother. I wasn't just someone desperate to protect her child. I was an FBI agent, and I had spent years working in the shadows, uncovering networks exactly like the one I had just stumbled upon. Karen had made a grave mistake. She didn't know who she had just crossed, but she would soon find out. And I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Not now. Not ever. The moment Emily was taken into the ambulance, my heart felt like it was being ripped out of my chest. I had no idea what the outcome would be. Would she survive? Would she make it through this? Every second felt like an eternity. But despite the chaos that swirled around me, I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not when things were about to get much worse. I stood there, watching the ambulance doors close, my hands still trembling. The police were swarming around, taking statements, gathering evidence, and talking to Karen, who was now sitting on the curb, cuffed and stone-faced. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. It was as if she had already won. But deep down, I knew she hadn't. Not by a long shot. And Karen was about to find out just how much of a mistake it was to cross me. What Karen didn't know was that I wasn't just some distraught mother. I wasn't just a woman running on pure adrenaline and rage. I was a trained FBI agent, a specialist in counterintelligence, a woman who had spent years on undercover missions that took me into the heart of criminal networks. And now I was going to use everything I had to make sure Karen and the network she was part of wouldn't get away with this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking, but I couldn't afford to let that show. I needed to stay calm. I needed to think clearly. As I dialed the number, I took in a deep breath, calming my nerves as I waited for the other end to pick up. "This is Agent Calloway. I need you to assemble the team. We have a situation," I said, my voice steady but firm. The voice on the other end didn't need to ask questions. My reputation preceded me. "Understood, Calloway. What's the status?" "It's Karen from the HOA. She's not just some neighborhood busybody. She's involved in something much bigger. Something dangerous. I need a full team and a secure location. I'm going to need backup." There was a brief pause before the voice responded. "We'll be there in 15. I hung up, turning my attention back to the scene. The officers were talking to Karen, but I could see the smug look on her face. She wasn't scared. She wasn't rattled. In fact, it was as if she knew she was going to walk away from all of this without a scratch. That thought made my blood boil. "Agent Calloway?" I turned to see one of the officers approaching me. He was a younger guy, his face tense with uncertainty. "Yes, we've got her in custody, but we still don't have the full story," he said. "You were right about the shooting. She admitted to pulling the trigger, but she won't say why. She's got a lawyer on the way. Any instructions?" I clenched my jaw, my anger flaring up again. I wanted to march over there, to confront Karen myself, to demand answers from her. But I knew that wouldn't be the best course of action. Not yet. I needed to play this carefully. Get her into an interrogation room. "I'll be there in a few minutes," I said, "and keep everyone else away. This is a federal matter now." The officer nodded and walked away. I took a moment to gather myself before heading to my car. The team would be here soon, but I couldn't afford to waste time. I had to act fast before Karen had a chance to slip through our fingers. As I drove to the secure facility, my mind raced. What was Karen really involved in? Who was she working with? The way she had looked at me earlier, it wasn't just disdain. It was almost like she was challenging me. She knew something I didn't. And whatever it was, I was determined to find out. The facility was a few miles away, tucked in a quiet part of town, away from prying eyes. I arrived in under 15 minutes, and by the time I stepped out of my car, the team was already there waiting for me. They were a group of specialists, all experts in different fields: surveillance, cybercrime, forensics, and more. Together, we were a force to be reckoned with. "Calloway, what have we got?" asked Mark, a seasoned investigator with years of experience. "She's part of something bigger," I said, my voice cold and calculated. "The HOA is just the surface. This goes much deeper. I need everything on her: background, associates, finances, anything we can use." Mark nodded. "We'll get started immediately. What's the plan for Karen?" "She's in custody, but she won't talk," I said, a determined edge to my words. "We're going to make her talk. She may think she's untouchable, but she doesn't know who she's dealing with. We'll break her." The team got to work, setting up their stations and preparing for the interrogation. I couldn't afford to waste time. Karen was dangerous, and the longer she stayed silent, the harder it would be to crack the network she was protecting. As we set up for the interrogation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Karen was too calm, too composed. She wasn't acting like someone who had just shot a child. She was acting like someone who had done this before. When we finally brought Karen into the interrogation room, her demeanor hadn't changed. She walked in like she owned the place, her head held high, her gaze sharp and calculating. I stood in front of her, arms crossed, studying her every movement. "Karen," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "we both know what happened today. You shot my daughter. You think you can just walk away from that?" She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Your daughter? Oh, please. It was never about her. It's about you. I've been watching you for a long time, Agent Calloway. I know who you are. I know what you've done." Her words caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting her to know so much. But that was the problem. Karen knew too much. "You don't know anything," I said, my voice low and controlled. "You think you can play these games with me, but you're about to find out that I don't play by anyone's rules but my own." Karen smirked, unfazed. "I think you're the one who's going to find out that you've made a mistake. You're not the only one who can play the game, Agent Calloway. You've been outplayed. And now you're in over your head." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Karen wasn't just taunting me. She was making a point, one that I didn't fully understand yet. But I would. Soon. I'd make sure of it. I could feel the weight of Karen's smug grin pressing down on me like a suffocating cloud. Her refusal to show any sign of remorse, her cold detachment, was unnerving. Most people in her position would have been panicked, maybe pleading, scared for their freedom. But not Karen. She was as calm as she had been when she shot my daughter. As I sat across from her in the interrogation room, my mind raced. I couldn't afford to let her think she was in control. But with every word she spoke, I realized how much deeper this situation went. Karen's calmness wasn't just the result of a lack of fear, it was the confidence of someone who had always been in charge. She had a plan, and she was playing me. "I'm not going to ask you again, Karen," I said, leaning forward, my voice low and controlled. "Why did you shoot my daughter?" Her lips curled into that same infuriating smirk. "Your daughter wasn't the target. You were." The words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. My mind struggled to catch up with the implications of what she had just said. I had assumed, no, I had hoped, that her actions were driven by some irrational moment of rage, that this was just some twisted vendetta. But this was something else. It wasn't about Emily. It was about me. "Why?" I asked again, my voice edged with a growing sense of urgency. "What's this all about?" Karen didn't answer immediately. She leaned back in her chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as if she were in a casual conversation rather than answering for a crime. She took her time, savoring the moment, as though she were toying with me. "You've always been the problem, Agent Calloway," she finally said, her tone almost patronizing. "You moved into this neighborhood thinking you were just some regular mother, just some civilian. But you're not. You're an agent of the FBI, and I've known who you were from the very beginning." My stomach dropped. She knew. She knew. "I'm not sure what you think you know, Karen," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "But if you think I'm going to let you get away with this, you're gravely mistaken." Karen chuckled softly, as though my threat were a joke. You don't get it, do you? You've been a part of this from the moment you moved in. You just didn't know it. Her eyes glinted with satisfaction. And now you're too deep to walk away. I was getting nowhere. The sense of confusion was becoming overwhelming. How could she have known who I was? I'd kept my identity as an FBI agent a secret, even from neighbors. I had worked in the shadows, infiltrating dangerous organizations, protecting my real identity. And yet here was Karen, casually telling me she had known everything all along. Enough games, Karen. I snapped, my patience wearing thin. What exactly are you involved in? What is this network you're part of? She leaned forward, finally dropping the act, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something darker in her eyes. You want to know, Calloway? You really want to know? I nodded, my entire being fixated on the answer that I knew would change everything. The HOA, the rules, the fake community spirit, it's all a cover-up for something much bigger. Something you'll never understand, she said, her voice a low whisper now, as if she were sharing some dark secret. We're not just an organization of homeowners, agent. We're a network, a very well-connected, very powerful network that operates under the radar. And you were chosen to join us. The words were like a slap in the face. My mind struggled to wrap around the idea that a neighborhood association, a group of people who worried about lawn care and mailbox colors, could be part of something so sinister. But Karen's expression told me it was real. This wasn't some delusion. What is this network? I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay composed. Karen looked around the room, as though she were making sure no one was listening, even though we were alone. She leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. We've been controlling things for years. Politics, business, law enforcement, the media, we've infiltrated every part of society. The HOA is just the beginning. We have agents everywhere, including the very place you work. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. My hands clenched into fists, my knuckles white. I had been so careful, so meticulous, keeping my professional life separate from my personal one. But now, everything felt like it was crashing together. Why didn't you just target me directly? I asked, why bring my daughter into this? Karen's eyes gleamed with malice. We needed to make sure you understood that you can't hide forever. You're a part of this now, whether you want to be or not. You've seen too much, heard too much. We've been watching you for months, Agent Calloway. It was only a matter of time before we moved in. Your daughter was just the leverage we needed to push you into action. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach. She wasn't just talking about me. She was talking about my family. My daughter. Emily was the pawn in this sick game, a tool used to manipulate me into doing whatever Karen's group wanted. I had underestimated Karen, and that had been my biggest mistake. She had been playing a much deeper game all along, and I was now trapped in it. But that wasn't going to stop me. I wasn't going to let them win. Not now. Not after everything. And what exactly do you want from me? I asked, my voice deadly calm now. What is it that you think you can force me to do? Karen smiled again, but this time, there was no humor in it. You're going to help us, Agent, whether you want it or not. You're already in too deep. The only way out is through us. Her words echoed in my mind, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about Karen. This was about an entire web of corruption and power, and I had just uncovered the tip of the iceberg. And now, I was in the middle of it whether I liked it or not. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in around me. My mind raced, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the one being hunted. I was the one doing the hunting. Karen had underestimated me, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I was no longer the same person I had been just a few days ago. The mother who had once walked her daughter to the playground, trusting the safety of her suburban neighborhood, was gone. That woman had been shattered the moment I had seen my daughter collapse from a gunshot wound. What stood in her place now was a woman hardened by the cold realization that everything I had known was a lie, and I was determined to make sure that Karen and the web she was part of paid for what they had done. After the interrogation, I knew that the game had shifted. Karen's cryptic words had confirmed what I had only suspected. She wasn't working alone. She wasn't even the one calling the shots. There were other players, much bigger players, in this conspiracy, and they were watching me. The stakes had escalated from a personal vendetta to a war. The question now wasn't whether I would get justice for my daughter, but whether I could expose a network that had infiltrated every corner of society. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. I had been playing by their rules for far too long, keeping my identity hidden, staying in the shadows. But those days were over. The gloves were off, and I was ready to fight back. That night, I met with my team at a secure location. There was no time to waste. We needed to move fast if we were going to stop Karen's network from spreading any further. The more we uncovered, the more dangerous this became. They weren't just operating locally, they had deep ties in the government, law enforcement, and even international organizations. Whoever these people were, they were powerful. And if I didn't act quickly, they would make sure that Karen wasn't the last person I'd be dealing with. We've got to hit them hard, I said, pacing back and forth as I outlined our plan. We've got a limited window of time. Karen will do everything she can to destroy evidence or cover her tracks, but we can't let her have that luxury. She has contacts, and they won't be happy with her arrest. We have to move quickly before they realize what's happening. Mark, one of my most trusted agents, spoke up. What's the plan? We have intel, but it's fragmented. We need something solid. I turned toward the board where we had pinned up the growing list of people tied to Karen's operation. We already have something. Karen's not the one calling the shots. Someone else is. I need to know who that is. And I need to find out before they figure out we're onto them. Mark nodded, flipping through the files. We've tracked a few connections to high-level government officials, but it's all coded. We need to crack the code before they make any moves. We'll do it together, I said firmly. I'm not waiting around for them to come for us. We set to work immediately, diving into the vast sea of digital communications, encrypted files, and coded messages that Karen's network had left behind. As the hours passed, the pressure mounted. We were close. I could feel it. But every lead we followed seemed to bring us deeper into the labyrinth, pushing us closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready for. Then it came. It was Mark who found it. A series of communications between Karen and someone known only by a single name, the director. No last name. No identifying information. Just a series of cryptic messages sent across secure lines. But there was one detail that couldn't be ignored. The director wasn't just some faceless figure in the background. This person was the architect of the entire operation. We've got him, Mark said, his voice tight with excitement. The director is calling the shots. He's been coordinating everything. This isn't just about Karen. It's about power on a scale we didn't even imagine. The pieces were finally coming together. Karen was a cog in a much bigger machine, and I was about to take down the person at the top. But the realization brought a new layer of danger. The director was no ordinary criminal. This was someone with far-reaching influence, someone who had carefully built this network from the shadows, pulling strings across the world. And now I was closing in on him. The next day, we launched a full-scale operation. It was all or nothing. The director was waiting, and I wasn't about to let him slip through my fingers. As we moved in, I couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. This was the moment of truth. There would be no turning back after today. I met with a select team of agents who had been briefed on the mission. The operation would be precise. We couldn't afford to leave any room for error. We had tracked the director to a private estate on the outskirts of the city, a fortress surrounded by layers of security. But we were ready. We'll hit him hard and fast, I said, looking at each of my agents. We know where he's hiding. We know what he's capable of. This ends today. The assault team geared up, checking their equipment and ensuring everything was in place. We had one shot. I didn't intend to waste it. We moved in under the cover of night, the estate looming ahead like a dark fortress. As we approached, the quiet of the night was punctuated only by the occasional chirp of a distant insect. Everything was eerily calm, but I knew better than to let my guard down. We were walking into the lion's den, and I wasn't about to be the one caught off guard. The breach was swift. We had anticipated the layout of the estate, using intel we had gathered from multiple sources. The director hadn't been careful enough. His communications had been sloppy, not in content, but in timing. He had underestimated us. As we made our way through the estate, I could feel the tension in the air. Every step took us closer to the director, and I knew that every second was a risk. We had no idea how many people were inside or what they were capable of, but we couldn't afford to hesitate. Then, the moment I had been waiting for. We reached the inner sanctum of the estate. The door was locked, but it was nothing we couldn't handle. My team and I moved quickly, breaching the door and storming inside. The director was sitting there, his back turned to us, as if he had been expecting us. He didn't flinch when we entered. He didn't even turn to face us. "I was wondering when you would arrive, Agent Calloway," he said, his voice smooth, almost amused. I couldn't believe it. The man I had been chasing, the one who had orchestrated everything, was sitting there, calm as can be. "We've got you," I said, my voice steady. "This ends now." He finally turned around, locking eyes with me. There was no fear in his gaze, only the same cold confidence I had seen in Karen. "You think this is over? This is only the beginning. You've made a grave mistake." I took a step closer. The only mistake I made was waiting this long. This was it, the final showdown. There was no turning back now. And with every piece of the puzzle finally in place, I was ready to make sure Karen and the director's network would be brought down for good. The sound of the door slamming behind me echoed in the empty hallway. The weight of everything I had just done hung heavy in the air. I had faced down the director, the mastermind behind a criminal network so vast and powerful that it seemed impossible to bring it down. But I had done it. With the help of my team, we had taken him down. The evidence was irrefutable. His network had been dismantled piece by piece, and Karen, along with her twisted group, were finally going to face justice. As I walked out of the secure facility, the adrenaline that had kept me going for days was starting to wear off. My muscles ached, my mind was exhausted, but in the pit of my stomach, there was a gnawing emptiness. The battle had been won, but at what cost? I had done everything I could to ensure that Emily would be safe again. She was recovering in the hospital now, her body slowly healing from the trauma, but the psychological scars would take longer to mend. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her lying on the ground, blood staining the playground. The sound of the gunshot replayed in my mind on an endless loop. The memories were still too fresh, too raw. But Emily was a fighter, and so was I. I had learned that over the last few days. I had learned that no matter how much darkness I faced, I could push through it. I could endure. And for my daughter, I would do whatever it took to make sure she had a future free from the fear that had once gripped her life. The days following the raid felt like a blur. I spent most of my time at the hospital, sitting by Emily's side, watching her wake up and slowly regain her strength. She had been through so much, but seeing the spark return to her eyes was a relief I hadn't known I needed. She was my rock, my reason for fighting, and now I could finally breathe, easy knowing she would be okay. But there was still much to do. The director's network had been exposed, but that didn't mean the job was over. The pieces of the puzzle had only just started to fall into place. Karen's arrest was only the beginning, and I knew that there were others out there who would try to fill the void left by the director's fall. I had already begun the process of tracking down those connections. The organization had been deeply entrenched in everything law enforcement, government, business. They had woven themselves into the fabric of society, and it would take years to truly root them all out. But for now, I allowed myself a brief moment of peace. I spent more time with Emily, making sure she knew how much I loved her. I didn't want to rush through this recovery phase. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't running from one crisis to the next. I was there, present with her, and that was all that mattered. It wasn't long before the call came in. I was sitting in Emily's room, watching her color in a book when my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Mark, one of the top agents on my team. He had been instrumental in breaking down the director's network. "Calloway," I said, answering the call. "We've got more," he said, his voice tight with urgency. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean, more?" "There are fragments, pieces of information we didn't fully decode before we took the director down. It looks like there's another layer to this, more players, more influence. We found evidence of someone else, someone in the shadows, pulling strings." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had hoped that after everything we'd uncovered, the world would finally feel like it was right again. But now, I realized that this was far from over. "Who?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't have all the details yet," Mark said, "but we're digging through more of the encrypted files. It's not just about business or politics anymore. There's something much more dangerous at play here. We need to track down these connections. I'll send you the new intel as soon as we have it." I didn't respond immediately. The weight of everything we'd uncovered already was enough to make me feel like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal and lies. But there was something worse than not knowing, and that was knowing the fight wasn't over. Knowing that the darkness was still out there, lurking. "Thanks, Mark," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Keep me posted." I ended the call and stared at my phone for a few moments. I could feel the familiar rush of adrenaline starting to build, but I shoved it down. Emily was asleep now, her small chest rising and falling with every breath. I couldn't let the chaos of my job consume me again. Not when I had already lost so much. The following weeks were a whirlwind. We managed to break into the remaining encrypted files, uncovering a new series of names, organizations, and locations. It was clear that the director's network had just been one small piece of a much larger puzzle. And though we had dealt a crippling blow to the operation, there was no denying that the full extent of its influence was far greater than we had anticipated. I found myself balancing the impossible, caring for Emily while hunting down a dangerous, invisible force. There were days when it felt like the two worlds collided, the soft, quiet moments spent with my daughter, and the long, harrowing hours spent poring over files and tracking down leads. Every piece of information we uncovered only led to more questions. It felt like we were chasing shadows. But no matter how elusive this network was, I couldn't stop. I couldn't walk away. Not when so many lives were still at risk. One evening, after a long day of sifting through intel, I sat down beside Emily. She had her stuffed bear in her lap, and she was watching some cartoon on the TV. She glanced over at me and smiled. "Mom, can we go to the park tomorrow?" she asked softly. I smiled back, feeling my heart swell. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll go first thing in the morning." The smile that spread across her face was pure joy, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to feel the weight of relief. No matter what came next, no matter how dark the path ahead, I would be there for her. I would keep her safe. As I sat there, holding Emily's hand, I couldn't help but think about how far we had come. We had fought a battle. We had won. But the war was far from over. The darkness still loomed. And I wasn't naive enough to believe that it would all just go away. But I knew this. I had the strength to face it. I had the knowledge, the skills, and the team to see it through. And I would do whatever it took to protect my daughter and the people I loved. The fight had only just begun. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed the intense journey of betrayal, courage, and survival. But the fight is far from over. The truth is out there, and the shadows are still waiting. What do you think happens next? Who do you think is behind the larger conspiracy? I want to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the story and want to see more twists, turns, and shocking revelations, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you're as determined as I am to uncover the truth, drop a comment below with your theories. I'd love to know which part of the story hooked you the most. Let's continue this journey together, and let's make sure justice is served for Emily, for the truth, and for everyone who believes in standing up against the darkness. Subscribe now, share this story, and join me in uncovering the rest of the secrets still hidden in the shadows.